EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. The practice squad gets its first 14 members. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Thursday morning, man?
Yeah, just back at that position I'm always in every year when waivers come through, and it's not that big of a deal. But no matter how many times I say it, it'll come up again next year. 26 players league-wide were claimed on waivers. That's
Small
it.
Number, yeah.
33% of that total from two teams, the Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots. So they're an abject disaster, those two teams. Yeah, I mean, when you work with someone, a young player through the spring and the summer, it's very rare you want to start over with a new young player. And that's what waivers are. So that's why it's kind of overrated each and every year. But everybody, the Eagles did not lose any players via waivers. So they could have worked out any deal with anyone that they did waive. And that is, I do believe Eli Ricks would have gotten claimed because Carolina claimed every cornerback on the market. So I think maybe they played that one well, but boy, is it overrated, Zander. Every year.
Oh, you 26, John. That's a small number. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that whole mentality around the league. And if you don't have young players like that, you point immediately at Carolina and New England. If you don't have young players you don't want to work with, that's a bad job by the organization and the personnel department.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, John, what were your first takeaways, though, on the guys that the Eagles brought back? There was really only two, I think, that were from outside the team, and that was Jack Stoll, an old friend who returned, and then Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, which is a
great name.
That's like a Hall of Fame name, Johnny Mac.
Rosemy-Jacksaint. Yeah, that's a player, undrafted player from Georgia. Georgia again. Eagles evidently tried to sign him as an undrafted free agent, lost out to the Commanders, and they're able to bring him in. That's another thing, even though, typically you like someone coming out in the draft process, and maybe if they shake loose, you want to work with them. And that's kind of what happened with Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, and a number of the Eagles' younger receivers got hurt. Jacob Harris, I think, would have been on the practice squad, but he suffered that concussion and broke bones in his face from that hit on the opening kickoff versus the Vikings. So he's banged up. Joseph Nada got hurt. So some of their young receivers, they couldn't work with anyway because they're banged up. So they looked outside the organization. And we talked about Jack Stoll yesterday. It made too much sense to bring him in, at least early, from the perspective of obviously he knows the organization and they're comfortable with him. And he's right up the road with the Giants. So he was at practice yesterday already. So he got in the car and drove down. But yeah, made sense. And they were able to get back Nick Gates. And the report there is that they are going to elevate him for week 1 already. So that's how they kind of that gamesmanship. In other words, he's a more important part of the backup offensive line than some of the guys they kept, but they felt like they could work out that wink deal in his case as a vested veteran. They did, and sort of told him, all right, you're going to be up. And if things go well, he'll be elevated. When they run out, he'll be promoted to the 53-man roster when they run out of practice squad elevations, which is 3. So he'll be the backup center week 1. And again, you have Jack Stoll to elevate a tight end. So all that concern over, oh, they only have 2 tight ends. They got Stoll and they brought EJ Jenkins back. And that's what Howie was talking about. And at center, they're able to bring Nick Yates back. They're able to bring Dylan McMahon back. And who knows, they might even bring Brett Toth back as well. But they haven't yet. So crisis averted, Zander.
Yeah, crisis averted, no doubt about it. I am happy that they got, I guess with only 26 guys, they got anybody they wanted back on the practice squad. Basically, who from this list though, John, do you think has the best chance to be elevated? In a week 1 role, a couple of these guys are simple.
Well, Gates has already been promised. He's coming up.
Yeah, Gates is coming up, so he'll be your backup center, and then I guess McMahon will live on the practice squad for a little bit.
Yeah. And Stoll, because you do need more than, especially when you think about the way Kellen Moore plays as an offensive coordinator. He wants to run 12 personnel a decent amount, so 2 tight ends on the field. You need a backup on game day. And I think Jack Stoll would be the other one that's going to be elevated early to be that backup tight end. So those are the 2 guys. And Gates has already been promised. That was part of the deal to bring him back. So he's going to be elevated.
So Stoll would be the tight end. Who was the third one you had? You had Gates, Stoll, and who else?
That's it. You can only elevate 2. So those are the 2 guys. You have 3 elevations for individual players during the year. So in other words, you can only elevate Nick Gates for a game 3 times. You can only elevate 2 players for each game. And that'll be Gates and likely 100% on Gates. Likely Jack Stoll would be the other one. I guess they could try to get by with 2 tight ends, but I doubt it. Just from the way Kellen, as I said, likes to play.
Yeah, that's going to limit them if they only have 2 tight ends and what Kellen can do. Or I don't think they'll do that.
Yeah, and that's why that would be my prediction for the second one. But again, Nick Stoll, conflating them. Nick Gates is going to be the backup center, and he's going to be elevated for week 1.
Yeah, so we'll see what they end up doing with the rest of it, but good stuff on the practice squad. There, we got a good show planned. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Good crowd already in here. Johnny Mac, as usual, we've had a great numbers so far as we get closer to the season. So thanks all of you guys for being here. Make sure you hit that like button this morning. Let's try and get up to 150 likes again. And now we're number 2. We'll have Brandon Lee Goutman from Bleeding Green Nation. So looking forward to talk to BLG, his takeaways from the 53-man roster, the practice squad, and some of the other stuff that we have kicked around. So looking forward to that. So that will be the show today. Johnny Mac and I in the first hour here kicking things around. So later on in the first hour, if some of you guys do have some questions, I will put super chats to the front and we'll kick them around with John if you have questions about the 53 or the roster or any of those things. John, what other takeaways do you have from the practice squad other than that it's become less and less meaningful with the cuts? Because 26 guys across the whole league get claimed. You basically have no fear of losing a guy unless he's a premium talent. Eagles lost nobody to other people. What other takeaways though do you have from the cuts and the practice squad?
Well, I do look. I mentioned Ricks. There's the one guy that probably would have gotten claimed if you did try to sneak him through, just because Carolina claimed, I think, 3 or 4 cornerbacks. So they're obviously a disaster at cornerback. So that's number 1. That's the one player that they probably were correct in trying to avoid waivers, I would say. But you never know. It's possible he would have gotten through, and they like those other corners better. That's just pure speculation. Same as last year when I would say I think they would have gotten through waivers last year, but you can never prove that because they kept him and they were concerned with it. The Gates stuff, again, Adam Schefter reports that's the deal. He's going to be elevated week 1. So The Eagles did this with Britton Covey for 2 years. For those who don't remember, he didn't make the roster, the initial roster, and they would elevate him for those first 3 weeks, and then they would put him on the roster when he ran out of elevation. So I think that's going to be the same case with Gates. And by game number 4, he'll probably be on the 53-man roster. Now, by that point, you'll probably have some attrition elsewhere, and it's easier to find a roster spot. But we'll see how that shakes out. So I keep an eye on that. Will Greer at quarterback back. Not a surprise to me because of how much Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier respect him. So I mentioned he might be back as that bridge conduit sort of, in the quarterback room as a player to sort of help Jalen Hurts and Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee get more expertise in this particular offense, because Will Greer's been doing it with Kellen, specifically with Dallas and also the Chargers. So this will be his third stop, is his third stop with him. Jenkins, I think, is a player that EJ Jenkins, a player that a bunch of people thought that should make the 53, but he's really raw. He's really more of a developmental player. So now he gets a chance to work on the practice squad as that second tight end. And maybe he develops down the road, but he's a college wide receiver trying to make the transition. So that's always a little bit difficult. Dylan McMahon is a 6th-round pick, undersized, I think, scared some people off, and that's the reason he was drafted where he was drafted to begin with. So I don't think there was much of a concern for the Eagles from that standpoint. I like that they got Brandon Smith back because he's just impressive physically. So if you can tap into that, he's so long, he's so big, so fast for an all-ball linebacker. But he was kind of between, or a lot of people looked at him as more as an edge rusher, and that's probably why you're trying to figure out, does he have the instincts to play off ball, or does he always have to go straight ahead? But good guy to work with. Getting Caden Stearns back, I didn't think would be a problem, so it was just a matter of how much did the Eagles want him back, and they did. So he's on the list, the practice squad as well. And they still have 3 open spots to work with, to bring, whether it could be guys, one of the funniest things yesterday, Brett Toth was in for a visit. Like Brett Toth has to visit the NovaCare complex, but you have to report these things to the league, so you have to do it. And that to me is a situation where he's probably checking out his other options. And if something else comes up and he's got a better opportunity, he'll leave. If not, maybe he'll come back. But he's probably disappointed that Nick Gates is going to be the backup center. It's kind of past him. So he's probably wants to look around. And it's always good to hold open a couple spots to look around the league and sort of cull through all the guys that were released and try to find some people on the back end of the practice squad you want to work with. And that's the case with, as you mentioned, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, guy the Eagles wanted to sign as an undrafted free agent, got a better deal from Washington, and all of a sudden he's here and you get to work with him.
There's a look, by the way, for everybody that wants a visual of the players on the practice squad. Johnny Mack just broke down most of them. So you got 14 guys, well, really 13, and then you have your international player. So it's 14, as John mentioned, 3 other guys that they could still add to the practice squad. So we'll see what they do with those 3 positions. John, how do you think they'll pick those 3 guys? Is it basically at this point you're just picking what players you like the most, or are they looking for a need-based filling, of those holes, or what?
Well, there's no need at this end of the roster.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was you needed a tight end because
you needed multiple tight ends, and they did sign multiple tight ends, and they needed guys with center versatility, and they got 2 of them back. So those were the 2 most obvious needs when you talked about when Howie was talking about that 53 that was going to expand ultimately till 70, and it will. But yeah, no need based thing. You do like to, obviously, you don't want to sign 2 more running backs or go about it that way. They might sign 1 more running back, but you don't want to go heavy at a certain position. But yeah, I mean, when you're down and we're talking about players, Lakin would be number 70, but so you're talking about players, 69, 68, 67, essentially. So yeah, these 3, whomever they will end up being, are probably not the guys that are going to be elevated anytime soon, is how I would say it. But I would also say this about, and Howie mentioned this in his press conference, about the developmental program, and gave a shout out to Connor Barwin, who everyone remembers as a second team All Pro edge rusher at one point with the Eagles. He's in charge of the developmental program now, and Howie gave him his credit for when he was talking about Thomas Booker. But there's a bunch of guys, notably Tristan McCullum, um, Ben Van Sumeren, who those are the guys that sort of, Connor and his staff, Matt Leo's a part of that as well, work with and try to get them on the right path to develop as players that maybe they can graduate from the practice squad as young players and be contributors. And the Eagles are doing a good job with that. So some of these guys might be in the equation down the road, just like Thomas Booker and Tristan McCullum and Ben are now.
Marcus Rosemead, Jack St. John. You know anything about the player other than he was undrafted, went to Georgia? What kind of receiver is he? And you think he's somebody that potentially could be elevated at any point this year?
It would have to take a lot from an injury perspective. You never say never, because if you suffer multiple injuries, but I don't think he's, ready-made to help. He's 6'1", just under 200, but he plays like a big receiver. He's more of a contested catch guy, more of a Joseph Nada type, just not with the same size as Joseph Nada. So he plays physical, or he should play physical, I should say. Good blocker, contested catch guy, not the most separation. Not the quick Britton Covey type who's going to generate all that separation. So probably because they lost a bunch of guys like that. Harris with the injury. It's a big guy, really big guy. Nada, they lost. He got banged up as well. So probably trying to bring that presence back into the room a little bit.
Yeah, good. So we'll see what they do with him. Overall, solid roster now, John. We're up to 53 on the regular. You got 14 practice squad guys. We're up to 67 with 3 spots to go. How you feeling about the first 67? How we talked about the 70 being the most important, not the 53. Does the practice squad improve any of that for you? How do you feel about the 67-man roster right now?
Yeah, I mean, they had the 2 obvious weaknesses, and that's what Howie was trying to say when he was talking after the cut to 53. Is when everyone was like, 2 tight ends. Why 2 tight ends? No backup center, and everybody's jumping to the conclusion about Landon Dickerson. My friend Bob Groats won't shut up about it. They ain't moving Landon Dickerson to center. He might be the best guard in football. They're very happy. Now, that's not to say if there's a bunch of injuries, can he play the position? Yes. So, of course, attrition. I always go back to Avonte Maddox. The Eagles had no intention of playing him at safety as a rookie. They were forced to. That's occasionally can happen, but there's no plan to play Landon Dickerson at center. So they were always going to bring back a guy with that versatility to play that position on the interior. And they were able to get Dylan McMahon back as well. More of a long-term developmental piece. But they were obviously confident that they built a relationship with Nick Gates in a short time, that he would be okay sitting in mothballs for a day. As long as he got those guarantees, and Adam Schefter reported that he's got those guarantees that he's going to be elevated right away and be part of the game day roster in Brazil. So that was the plan. And that's sort of the tricks that we were talking about on the show, that how he's going to use. We just didn't know where they would be. That's an example of one of them. And the same thing at tight ends to get back Jack Stoll, which we did. That was one of the obvious ones. You start thinking about Parham because of his relationship with Kellen Moore, but Howie's in charge of the roster, so he's very comfortable with Jack Stoll, and he's a guy you can elevate week one and be comfortable with, and that enables you to keep another guy that you would have had to get through waivers, and you just a little bit more comfortable doing it that way.
John, any other comments on the practice squad? We're going to get to our first commercial break here, then come back, and we got about an hour until we get to Brandon Lee Gowan. But I got some roster questions for you. I got some, questions about certain positions on this team where we have a lot of commentary on the chat, and then we'll also take a couple questions from our viewers when we get back. So, any other comments on the practice squad, though, just to wrap up what the Eagles did yesterday, getting those 14 guys?
Well, this is the time for the practice squad, but no, I think I hit everybody. Maybe Andre Sam obviously was a guy they were going to bring back, but he's a bit of an older rookie from the standpoint. So, he's behind the 8 ball. He's going to be 26 already in February. So he's one of those COVID players who played 6 years in college, but he did some nice things. In camp, and it's understandable. I mentioned Stern. Gabe Hall's a guy who I thought a lot of people thought he was the most gifted undrafted free agent they signed this year. And he didn't do much in camp, to be honest. A little bit of a tweener. He plays defensive tackle, but he looks like a defensive end. And maybe they can, he'll develop him. I talked about Connor and Matt Leo. Maybe they can develop him, but that's probably a year plus long project. But to get him back can't hurt, and then just the veterans. Oren Burks obviously is a big one. Is probably the best player on the practice squad. Not probably, but I would say definitely. So if you look at the veteran players, Oren Burks, Paris Campbell's back. I didn't mention Paris. Nick Gates, Will Greer, and Jack Stoll. Those are guys that can help you at some point pretty quickly, probably, if you need it.
Will Greer, he might be a future coach, huh, John?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it that Kellen and Doug Nussmeier are. And by the way, I shouldn't have included Will Greer, and that can help you. He's here just specifically to be a bridge from between the players and the coaching staff. But I do think you will see Will Greer as a coach here if Kellen Moore is still here in the upcoming years, or eventually wherever Kellen Moore goes. I think you're going to see him be a coach pretty quickly.
Yeah, Will Greer and Kellen, they like each other. Hopefully, Will has a good career ahead of him in coaching. I could see it for him. So up to 64 likes already. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. That's a good number through our first half hour. Just broke down the practice squad. We're going to get to our first commercial break. Johnny Mac and I will come back. We'll kick around the roster, some questions. I got some specific players I want to talk to John about. We'll do all that next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your greenhouse? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365, August 29th, which means does that mean we're 8 days away, Johnny Mac, from the Eagles opener in Sao Paulo? I think it does, right?
Yeah, Friday, week from tomorrow.
8 days away from the Sao Paulo Open. The Eagles taking.
Not happy about that. Yeah.
No, I'm not either. And I think all the fans, John, have started to come to the realization that what you said on the schedule release day or earlier, I think because that game came out a couple days earlier, is that you were correct. I mean, and even when you said it, I'm like, really, John, does it matter that much? And you're like, this is not a good move, not a good spot. And I'm hearing that more and more, especially on Eagles YouTube and listening to some of the guys. They're like, yeah, it sucks that we lost a home game, versus the Packers in Brazil, but it is what it is. So we'll see what ends up happening with that game down there. John, I want to ask you about one guy, and we brought him up yesterday a little bit on the show, and Andrew DeCecco had some good words about him. Nolan Smith. Where are you on Nolan Smith right now? What's your thoughts on that player coming into the year?
Not overly excited, but at the same time, I think a lot of people have taken that way too far. And the assumption that they're already chalking him up is a bust. I think that's kind of ludicrous, to be honest, to go down that road so quickly. It's funny. I talk about like no matter how many years go by, no matter every year at this time at the cut down, people are worried. And I'm not just blaming fans. I mean, there's media people about losing players and multiple players on teams, and it just never manifests itself that way. And the next year comes and the same worries are created. The easiest example with players needing time would be Brandon Graham in Philadelphia. Obviously, you would think some would learn from it, and that there's no guarantee that anybody's going to develop. Look at Jalen Rager. But I mean, to give up on somebody with so much talent because he didn't hit the ground running as a rookie. And oh, by the way, the context of that was he wasn't healthy, but he did play through some shoulder issues. So I would pump the brakes, but at the same time, that doesn't mean I'm going to tell you, oh, it's all going to be fine for Nolan Smith. He struggled at times in camp. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy. A lot of NFL offensive tackles are very, very powerful people. And if they get their hands on somebody like that, it can get ugly. On the other end, sort of parry away from that. And Nolan Smith, his strength is speed. And, he runs a 4.39. There aren't too many edge rushers that are as quick as him, as fast as him. So he's got to use what he has to his best abilities and understand the leverage game and technique and that kind of stuff. And it's a work in progress. But is he a failure? I mean, that camp, they're just impatient. Maybe it's just part of a social media society where everything's got to be immediate. There's a host of players that need time to develop, and Nolan needs time to develop. And then we talk about the Lane Johnson factor all the time, and nobody looks good in practice against Lane Johnson, including Hassan Reddick. And then when it was Fred Johnson or somebody else, he looked a little bit better. So, but he's got to prove it, and he's got to play better, and he's got to play more, and he's got to be part of that rotation. If not, somebody like Patrick Johnson is going to pass him up.
Yeah, no doubt. I do think there is some merit for sure to like the social media era, and nobody has patience anymore. And I think that is part of it. But my concern with Nolan is I don't see it from an I'm concerned that the talent level and the strength, it's just not there to compete with NFL tackles consistently. And that's not as much of a knock on Nolan Smith as it is. Well, it is when you're a first-round draft pick, but these guys are big, and I just don't know if I see it with Nolan Smith. Like, is he ever going to be able to develop into that guy? I don't know. Some guys you see, they're like, all right, he has talent. He's just got to get acclimated to the league. I don't see it with Nolan Smith from the eye test. I'm not saying he can't develop, but that's what concerns me about him is I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of juice, and I've seen flashes of it. Can he be consistent with it? I don't think there's any doubt you're going to see some flashes from Nolan Smith. That's not my concern. Can you do it consistently from play to play, week to week? That's what sets the really, really good edge rushers apart. And I don't know if he can get to that point, but I do know he can get to I've seen him get to the quarterback in practice. But everybody can get to the quarterback in practice at times and flash. It's the NFL. Everybody's good. So yeah, he's a long way from being a finished product. I will say that.
This is where I go with kind of what I was trying to say is Crowley, is Nolan strong enough to run through tackles is the question. Definitely not running through anybody. Tries jump when he might run around him because he's quick, but he's not running through any tackles, I don't think.
No, I mean, it's the same thing as any undersized player at any position. I mean, they're undersized. They're up against it from the perspective, but that doesn't mean you can't win in other ways. Burton Covey talked about it again yesterday. You know, his strength is quickness and ability to generate separation. He's not going to be a contested catch guy. He's not going to run through Trent Williams.
Nobody is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not going to run through Lane Johnson. Of course, but that's where you develop the technique and the leverage game, and you have to understand, your pass rushing moves, your handwork. You got to get those big guys off balance, and all of a sudden, you look like Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick couldn't run through Trent Williams. He wrecked the NFC Championship game. Talking about power. I don't think the entire Eagles defense could be. Did you see the fight in the San Francisco game? The whole freaking what who were they playing in that game? Did you see that clip?
I saw. I don't know who they were playing, but I saw Trent Williams run up and a whole lot of grown men cowered.
Yeah,
cowered in their shit.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to blame Nolan Smith. I mean, there's certain guys who play offensive line in this league that are just ridiculously powerful, and you're trying to beat them a different way. You're not going to beat them with strength.
Yeah, good stuff. We do have some good comments. There's got, I'm a firm believer in letting guys develop, and I think there is some merit to that. Sliger brings up a good point. Reddick didn't do jack for 3 years. Graham was a bust for longer in casual fans' minds. Patience, grasshoppers. I think you bring up a good point, Sliger. I want to get to a super chat here from James talking about Nolan Smith, kicking around the Nolan Smith topic right now. He seems to have been getting a lot of talk amongst the Eagle media, the Eagle fans, everybody that covers this team. James Carver says, J-Mac, do you think the Nolan bust combo overlooks how Nolan's still developing hands and moves because he wasn't a pure edge at UGA and he played a lot of jack with more free runs out of tight and mint, more akin to White's limits with free run?
Yeah, and he even played a little bit of off-ball linebacker last year at the end of the season with the Eagles, so there is some thought to that. He was kind of raw. And obviously, there was a lot of talk that he would be a top 15 pick. And if the Eagles didn't move up, they might take him where they originally were.
If you go back pre-draft, John, people were like, if we can't get Jalen Carter, we'll be happy with Nolan Smith.
Yeah, exactly. And it's but he wasn't a finished product. So, yes, there's a lot of work to be done. And that's what he's doing behind the scenes with Jeremiah Washburn. And especially it becomes technique and fundamentals are always boring, but it's really big when you have to play against guys like the top tier players in this league because you're not going to beat them with bull rushes, to say the least. And you have to set them up and almost like a Greg Maddux savvy like pitcher. You got to set him up with one move to get to another move. And that's the stuff he's kind of working on. Right now, he's kind of a one-trick pony with speed rush. And those guys are going to shut that down. The top-tier tackles in this league are going to understand how to shut that down. When he can complement that, then you might really have something. And that's what the Eagles are working on.
Yeah, we'll see what Nolan can do. You don't think there's any outside chance that if worst case scenario happens, they play Nolan Smith as an off-ball linebacker, do you?
Not this year. Last year, they already did it. This year, they have.
I mean, more like a full-time conversion, though. Like, you don't expect him to be an edge rusher for you. You morph him into Zach Bond.
No, I don't think so. Maybe down the road when they if he fails and they don't want to give up and their ego gets involved, maybe you try him at a different position. But no, they did it last year out of injury necessity. And that could happen again, but I doubt it because they're so much deeper linebacker, off-ball linebacker. So he's going to get an opportunity to develop and he's going to get an opportunity to play at least early And if he plays well, he'll get more playing time. If he plays poorly, he'll probably get less. So it's all up to Nolan at this point.
Good stuff, James. Thank you for the super chat, man. We appreciate it. Appreciate the commentary. Appreciate the support of the channel as always. John, the reason I brought him up is because of kind of what Andrew said yesterday about I forget the word he used. He said it's almost malpractice, I think he said, to write off Nolan Smith at this point. And
Well,
I'm
it is.
on.
I mean,
No, I get it, but I mean, look, this guy was a first-round draft pick, and I think while I understand Andrew's point, I think being objective too far is a thing as well. And this guy's a first-round draft pick. I mean, you can't be upset that people want to see a little bit more than they have, and
Well, I don't think anybody's upset about it. I don't think Andrew's upset about it. I never get upset about it. It's ridiculous to give up on any player after one season. Do I understand the expectations? Yeah, of course. I mean, but here's the deal with expectations. You got the same fan base, right? Fired up about getting the number 16th overall pick from 2022. It was a failure in Washington's mind, but they're fired up.
right.
Because he didn't do it for them. And he's the 16th. Well, the same thing would happen, and the same thing is going to happen. Evidently, the whole league is fighting over Lewis Seen, and he was going to sign with the Jets, and now he's going to sign with Buffalo, and everybody's excited in those cities. Former Georgia guy as well, former first-round pick, even though he was 32nd. I broke my own rule. I think it was the 32nd pick.
John, yeah, go ahead. I want to talk about that though in a second.
The fan bases in Buffalo is fired up. Oh, they stole him from the Jets, and meanwhile the Vikings can't wait to get rid of him. The team that he was on. I'm not trying to say that Nolan Smith is going to turn into a good player. I'm trying to say you don't give up on a player after one season, and there's some injury context to it. That's what Andrew was talking about when he used, what term did he use?
Malpractice.
I mean, that's absurd to give up on a player that quickly. And then be fired up about Jahan Dotson, who's got no injury issues, no serious injury issues, and didn't perform like the 16th overall pick in Washington.
Well, there are other stark differences though, that we could use a first-round edge rusher right now that plays damn good. We're banking on Bryce Huff. We're banking on Josh Sweat. I think it'd be great to have a third guy that lives up to the expectation, but we don't know if he's going to. Child of God says, so what are you all, and I wouldn't count John in this, you're more talking to me here. What are you all going to say if he starts balling out next season? Just stop it. I'm going to say, good, child of God. Congratulations. You want me to thank you for not robbing a bank? He's a first-round draft pick. I think there should be some expectation on the guy to go out and deliver, and if he doesn't, it's going to be criticized. I mean, I hear what you're saying. We got to be patient, but I'm not going to sit here and just be overly patient, waiting for him to turn the page. So I appreciate the comment.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, see, I told you to be patient.
Yeah, exactly. And but that's fine. I'm perfectly good. I'm perfectly good with that objectivity from you. But I'm looking for more from Nolan Smith. I have no problem saying that, and I don't believe it's malpractice for me to say it. Saquads gives us $10. Saquads, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. One of our best viewers. He got the wrench yesterday, Johnny Mac. So Saquads is feeling good. He comes in with a $10. He says, you can't write off Nolan yet, but a first-round edge rusher that contributes nothing year one when we needed it and didn't look good against a third, fourth stringer so far this season is concerning. I would agree with that, Saquads. What do you have to say to that, Johnny Mac?
Well, again, nobody brings up the shoulder. He played with a harness all year. He had a procedure to get it fixed. Hopefully it's fixed. Maybe it isn't. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a surgeon. But he had some injury issues he was playing through. Didn't complain about him. Played every game. Played with the harness on, as I said. So there's that context to it. Maybe if he's healthy, that cleans up a lot of the issues right away. But I do think there are other issues, and I'm not going to run from them as well. He did get bigger. He needed to get bigger. He needed to get stronger. That's always a thing with players, young players in the NFL, especially undersized ones for his particular position. And then the first round stuff. It's just, it drives me nuts because, again, and I just used an example with Scene. He's a first round pick, forever a first round pick. He was 32nd. What if he was 33rd? Nolan was 30th. What if he was 33rd? All of a sudden, the huge expectations dip. So I don't care about the first round pick part of it other than he's got talent. How do you tap into that talent? And that's what the Eagles are trying to do. But his explosive numbers are off the charts. I mentioned he ran a 4.39. He also had a 41.5 vertical. So that measures explosion. His broad jump was off the charts. That measures explosion. He's just got to figure it out from a technique standpoint. And that ain't easy, by the way. But if he can do it, I think you really have something.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Saquads, thank you for the super chat, man. We appreciate your commentary in the chat. Appreciate everybody in here right now giving us good commentary. A lot of conflicting viewpoints, which is a good thing. I mean, I appreciate all the different perspectives, and I think it's okay to disagree every once in a while. We are talking football at the end of the day. John, let's stay in the edge rusher room, but I want to get off Nolan Smith. I want to ask about Jalix Hunt. He was the 3rd round draft pick this year. He was a guy that was, earmarked as a project developmental type of player. So far, it seems like he's been that, but maybe even a little bit further down the line than people were expecting him to be. From an up close and personal perspective, you got to see him. Not everybody here did. I certainly didn't. What did you see from Jalix Hunt throughout camp, and just is he further along than you projected him to be?
No, I think he's right where I expected him to be. I think Vic's comments were interesting about Jalix Hunt, but the old backhanded compliment of, he played better than he's looked in practice, which I thought was classic Vic and funny. I think he's what he was portrayed as. Developmental prospect. He's going to need some time. But one thing Vic's good at is using, like, if somebody can do something right away, he'll put them in a package. So he can go straight ahead. He can get after the quarterback, and perhaps Vic will use that in a package if it's 3rd and 13, 3rd and 15, and if he's active. I don't even know if he's going to be active early. My guess would be no, because I think Patrick Johnson is one of the most improved players on this team and is more ready to help right now against the Green Bay Packers. So my guess is he'll be inactive. But he's right where I thought he'd be, a developmental prospect. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people will be more patient because he's not a 1st round pick. Now, there's a lot of people that are impatient no matter what, and they'll say, well, you can't use a 3rd round pick. We've already heard that on a developmental guy. But I think he's right about where he should be. And that would be probably not dressing early in the season. And maybe he's ready if the attrition starts to pile up and you need an edge rusher.
Yeah, good stuff. On Jalix Hunt. I think he's going to have a bigger impact this year than we're expecting. I really do. I think he's a guy that could get out there. He could have a couple sacks this year. He looked a lot better than I was expecting him to look. He looks like he looked more technically sound than I thought he would. But the edge rusher room is interesting, John, because really from 3 to 6, it could go any way in terms of who gets the most snaps, who has the most impact. It's Nolan, it's BG, it's Jalix Hunt, and it's Patrick Johnson. And I think at any given week, depending on who's hot or who's playing better, any one of those guys could be the 3rd edge rusher and have the most impact on any given game.
I think Brandon's going to be the third edge rusher.
Well, me too. But my worry with Brandon is like because he's 35, maybe there's some games where Brandon doesn't have as much in the tank, maybe an injury, something like that. You know, that's more what I'm projecting.
I mean,
I do think BG's the best one of them for sure, but he is old.
Yeah. And you always, I mean, Father Time gets everybody. So you never know when it's coming. I haven't seen evidence that it's coming, but you never know when it's coming. So, yeah, I think it's fine to point that out. I think the fourth best edge rusher on this team is Patrick Johnson. We'll see if I'm right.
I don't think you're crazy at all for saying that. I see it too. I mean, he looked amazing, and he's a guy that really talk about. It's almost TJ Edwards-esque the way he looks now compared to what he looked like when he was first drafted in 21.
Yeah, and he spent a lot of time working on his body, and yeah, I think you get pigeonholed and people say, well, that's what Patrick Johnson is. But if you give him an opportunity, I think people are going to be surprised. And I think he's going to get an opportunity. But a lot of that depends on Nolan. When you're talking about Jalix, I always bring up, Kentley Platt at MathBomb, follow him on X. Nolan as a edge rushing prospect coming out, was ranked 126th out of 1,629 from 1987 to 2003 when you talk about measurables. And the only reason he was that bad, and I put that in quotations, because of the size, really poor size comps compared to most defensive ends. His height, for instance, 2.39 out of 10. Because he's small. He's 6'2". His weight, 238 at the time, even worse, 0.7, really small. Now he's about 245. His testing numbers, his vertical leap, which I mentioned, 41.5, 9.98 of all these guys. His broad jump, 9.94. His 40-yard dash, 9.99. His 20-yard split, 9.99. His 10-yard split, which indicates that get off, 10, which means he was number one over that time frame. That's what you're talking about from an athleticism standpoint. All he's got to do is find the technique and put it together, which I'm not saying is easy. But this guy is an athletic freak. And maybe people will get to see it someday.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening, John. We're going to get to another commercial break here in 5 minutes. We just kicked around the edge rushers a little bit. How you feeling about the defensive tackle room, boy? They kept a lot of guys in that room. Thomas Booker, one of them. What's your overall thoughts on where that is this year? At one point in the offseason, I was saying I believe they need to add more depth to take some of the load off of, Jordan and Jalen. Now they're 6 deep, but there are a lot of young guys in that room, man. What's your take on that room right now?
Yeah, it's very young.
Really young.
I think the oldest guy is 25. 25. Yeah, I was gonna say. Look, I think Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Milt Williams are really good. So, do you have enough depth? Is Moro Ajomo ready to take the next step? Is Marlon Tuipulotu ready to take the next step? Is Thomas Booker? If it's not those guys, it's Thomas Booker. And I don't know, are they keeping them because that's the best of what they have, or are they keeping them because they think they have clear-cut, legitimate prospects? They're unproven to a large extent. Even Marlon, this will be his 4th year. Certainly Thomas, certainly Morrow. You've seen flashes, but I wouldn't want any of the top 3 to go down. I will say that. Jalen Carter's going to be I firmly believe he's going to be in the conversation to be the best football player the Eagles have.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the best DT in the league this year.
He's that good. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
yeah, Fletcher's out, Aaron Donald's out. I think Jalen Carter's the next guy. I mean, there's a lot of good DTs in the league. I don't want to
there's a
dismiss
lot
them.
of good. There's a lot of good defensive.
Yeah, but I think
But
Jalen
he's got the
Carter's
talent.
raw talent is right there. Yeah.
And I think Jordan Davis is one of the most underrated players on the team, both from a value standpoint and because people want sacks from a nose tackle, and they're not getting sacks from a nose tackle. But he's really important to what the Eagles do defensively. And then Milton's been underrated for years. A big year for Milton because he's betting on himself. And if he has a big year, he's going to get big money from the Eagles or somebody else, most likely from the Eagles. But I like the top three. The depth, I'm not as high on, but that's the Eagles have a top-heavy roster. We'll talk about this with BLG in the hour too, but they got a top-heavy roster, so there's a lot of depth questions all over the place. But I'd rather have the star players, to lean on because you can't control injuries. So, but it's fair to point out the question marks behind them.
You think it's a problem how young that entire group is? You think they would benefit from an older guy in there?
Yeah, probably. But I mean, it just worked out that way. You're not going to bring in an old guy just to bring in an old guy.
Yeah, right.
It's nice to have Fletcher Cox who can still play at a high level as he ages.
I thought Fletcher had another year left in the tank. Everybody was knocking Fletcher, by the way, our fans. They might not like that I wanted him back another year. Everybody's like, oh, Fletcher, get him out of here. He's done. I thought Fletcher played good last year. I love Fletcher Cox. He's one of my all-time favorite Philadelphia Eagles.
Boy,
I would have loved for him to come back.
They turn on you quick. He's one of the best defensive players in Eagles history.
Yeah, you already have some people turning on BG, Johnny Mac. We had somebody in the chat a couple seconds ago. BG was a wasted roster spot. I couldn't disagree with that more.
Boy, man, no loyalty. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you don't want to be loyal to a fault, so I understand that perspective.
Sometimes
but BG has been a productive player still. So was Fletcher Cox.
Sometimes you do hang on too long, but these were not the two players to use as an example of that.
I feel like, John, Howie has put an emphasis in recent years, especially in recent years, on the way he treats certain players because I think it goes into the James Bradbury thing. I think Howie doesn't want to. He wants to show that that they're a good organization to play for, that they take care of their players, that people like to play here, and I think that's part of the reason he doesn't want to do James Bradbury dirty by cutting him. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think James Bradbury's an ego decision. Okay. Howie's got an ego like everybody else has an ego. Yeah, the Eagles are already, they built that up. They're regarded as one of the best organizations to play for. And they built that up over years and years and years. And you see that all the time. People want to play here. They want to come here. They take less money to stay. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not that they were going anywhere, but they take less money than they could have made because they like the organization. That he's already accomplished that. I think he knows that, but he's got an ego like everybody else. And he doesn't want to admit a mistake. And what you saw happen with James Bradbury is the rest of the league saying, you got to cut him, you got to cut him, you got to cut him. We're just going to wait. And what Howie did is said, oh, you think I'm going to cut him? I'm not going to cut him. And a little bit of ego involved would be.
No doubt. John, before we get to our break, there's one thing I want to talk to you about, and it was heartwarming for me a little bit, not to go soft on everybody, but I listened to a segment of Fred Johnson meeting with the media yesterday, and his, when he spoke about, Stoutland and being here in Philly and thinking he was on the outs and, kind of giving up part of himself to become a better pro, to become a better player. I thought it was really a great, a dope answer, if I can say that. I thought it was really, great to hear Fred Johnson do that. What did you take away from Fred yesterday in that press conference?
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun talking to Fred yesterday. Fred's a very upbeat guy, very energetic guy.
He was real in that moment, though. He was really raw in that moment. Like,
yeah,
he
he was. You know, when Fred first got here, I don't think he took anything seriously. And I remember remarking to people, I said, I don't think Fred's going to be here that long because, you know, they're going to find somebody else and who might take it a little bit more seriously, to be kind. And I always wondered, you know, why they kept going. And now I know. And kind of explained it himself when he was talking about Stoutland and, you know, getting on him at practice, even though he was a practice squad player. And he was like, leave me alone. I'm a practice squad player. He's like, he just wanted to pick up his paycheck and be done with it. And Stoutland was coaching him like he was a starter. And at first it pissed him off, as I said. And then, you know, he respected the fact that he got to him. You know, if you think about being a coach, how do you reach a young person? And Stoutland was able to reach him by being tough on him and saying, I'm not giving up on you because I think you can play. So his exact quote, I was trying to bring it up. He earned my trust by never giving up on me. Just day in and day out, I was on the practice squad and he was coaching me like a starter. I got tired of it. I'm like, please stop. And then when I finally got the extension on the guaranteed contract, it was like, hey, you worked for it. And even now he still tells me, I love you and you're doing great things. And then he'll throw in his little 2 cents of what he could do better. It's just the way I take to coaching. He's not trying to belittle me or tear me down. He's trying to build me up. And you always got to find these little ins with players, because Fred was like pissed off that he was on the practice squad. He said he was mad at everybody. He considered it rock bottom. And Stoutland figured out a way. And now he's a big part of the team. And they gave him a guaranteed contract last year, ripped up his futures contract. And yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah, I did. I thought it was a great story.
Another good story from Jeff Stoutland to explain, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're Lane Johnson or the guy on the practice squad, he's gonna try to get everything out of you.
Yep, no doubt. I thought that was worth mentioning. I thought that was pretty cool to listen to Fred, you know, speak like that. And I thought it was as you just pointed out, a good message, a good homage to Stoutland, who I thought, you know, does do a great job. Any other takeaways, John, from who spoke yesterday at the pressers while we're on that topic?
Yeah, I brought up a little bit with Thomas Booker and how he had mentioned Connor Barwin's impact on him on the developmental aspect, and Thomas added to that with Matt Leo as well, who was here recently as an international player. Now he's part of the coaching staff, part of the developmental program with Connor. Britton Covey spoke as well. First time for the people that don't know, he's been here for a long time, but the Eagles always cut him on the initial 53, playing those roster games. And now he's sort of entrenched, and Britton's unbelievable for anyone who's ever heard one of his interviews. He's the most open, engaging guy probably on the team. So he's always interesting to talk with. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., a little bit more reserved, which is understandable. He spoke yesterday. You know, he's a rookie. It's a lot of rookies don't feel like it's their place to, you know, take over early in the process. And I think that's where Trot is. And then I was trying to figure out who else. And Ben Van Sumeren, another great story of, you know, I thought it was interesting because I said it pretty much on the show all the time. Like, I never doubted Van Sumeren was going to make this team. Andrew was on yesterday, same way. Never doubted it. Because we're at practice every day, and there's a bunch of people asking him, "Oh, how was your cut down day?" And were you nervous? And he's like, "No, I essentially made the team. I knew I was on the team." For some reason, because of his pedigree and his undrafted status, people think Ben Van Sumeren was a bubble player. He was not a bubble player. He went into cut down day not worried at all because he knew he made this football team.
Oh, anybody that listened to Birds 365 knew that as well.
Yeah, well, they should have, but I think it's hard for people to get over that hump of, oh, he's not a first round pick. He's not a day 2 pick. But he was really good, really consistent throughout the whole summer.
No doubt. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. One more super chat I want to get to before we get to our commercial break. We'll have Brandon Lee Gouton coming up in about 12 minutes. So not much longer only. We'll have one more break before BLG. Say quads with another 10. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for being here this morning. Thanks for being a loyal listener and a watcher on JAKIB Sports. Retreat. But Stoutland has a way with people. Someone may come in with a negative attitude, but Stout can break down those barriers if the player is willing to embrace the selflessness of his philosophy. I would agree with that. Johnny Mac, what's your take, especially being up close and personal for Jeff Stoutland for so many years?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Jeff. Jeff is, and he does, and you see it all the time when you're at practice, and he does spend as much time with the practice squad guys, lower guys on the roster, as he will spend the same amount of time with them as Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey back in the day, etc., Brandon Brooks, however you want to go back. And, you know, the whole thing about, and Nick talks about it all the time, it's not about being friends with the players. It's about making them better. And they'll respect you if they think you can make them better. If you think you can make them a little bit better than what they think their ceiling was. And that's when you sort of connect with NFL players. And Stoutland does that better than anybody because it's evident he cares. It's evident he spends the time. And I mean, he's who he is for a reason. He's got more. We talk about Howie Roseman and his job security. I don't think there's anybody in the building with more job security than Jeff Stoutland. You know, he came in with Chip Kelly.
Crazy. Best thing Chip Kelly did for this organization and draft Lane Johnson. That was another good one. But yeah.
Chip Kelly, don't give him too much credit for Lane Johnson. They had the 4th pick and they wanted to take Deion Jordan. But Oregon
at the end of the day, here we are, however many years later, and Lane is still here. So he's got to get some credit.
Don't give him too much credit for that because he would have rather had Deion Jordan. But yeah, I mean, and when you're at the 4th pick in the draft, you should be making good decisions. But yeah, Lane has worked out tremendously, to say the least. Yeah, but in the case of Stout, you know, all those coaches and hey, if things go poorly and Nick Sirianni's out, I guarantee whoever the next coach is, one of the demands will be, well, yeah, Stoutland's going to be your offensive line coach.
Yeah,
if he wants to be.
Slagger brings up a good point. All you need to know about Stoutland's job security is that they supposedly told Kingsbury to hit the bricks when he demanded that Stout go. It's true.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I was going
to ask you, have you ever confirmed that report that he wanted to change them out?
No, he wanted to change. Remember, a bunch of guys stayed. Everybody stayed, basically. Kevin Petullo, Stoutland, Aaron Moorhead, Jamal Singleton. The only coaches Kellen Moore got were Doug Nussmeier, his longtime right-hand man, and Kyle Valero, who's a lower-level coach. That's it. Everybody else was brought back. So
yeah, which is a tough ask for many coaches that are going to be an OC.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Kingsbury's not here. By the way, I think the Eagles got that right. Maybe not by design, but they got it right. It wasn't just Stoutland. is what, he wanted to make a bunch of changes. And I don't know if that's the one where I think he would have been agreeable to that. I don't know that for a fact. Like if it were Stoutland and everybody else gone, I think Kingsbury would have been fine with that. So I don't think it was, oh, I want to replace Jeff Stoutland. But a lot of people think that, but I don't think that was the case.
Last comment I'll read on Jeff Stoutland from Say Quads again. Thank you, man, for the super chats. He says, the moment you saw at the end of last season with Kelsey and Stout let you know all you need to know about the man that Stout is. Man, those are those linemen lucky, and for us getting to see that product. No doubt, Say Quads. I thought that was a great moment as well and was worth mentioning on the show today. Let's get to our next commercial break. Johnny Mac will have about 6 or 7 minutes until we get to BLJ. Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation. Looking forward to talking to BLJ. Appreciate everybody in the chat this morning. Got a good crowd in here, up to 101 likes. So thank you guys for the likes. Let's try and get to 250. We got 47 minutes left to go on the show. Can we get another 49 likes? I think we can. Appreciate you guys. Stay tuned. Birds 365 will be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. Waiting on BLG. Brandon Lee Gouton will join us in just a couple of minutes. Johnny Mac, plenty of new people watching compared to the start of the show. In these next 3 minutes before we get BLG up, let's just recap real quick. Your thoughts on the practice squad. The Eagles got 14 of their 17 finalized. That not finalized because it's never final. It's a fluent thing, but just your takeaways on what the Eagles did yesterday with the practice squad.
Yeah, lost nobody on waivers, so all the hand wringing, not that big of a deal, as it typically isn't that big of a deal. 26 players league-wide were claimed on waivers. that is less than one per team, and two teams, Carolina and New England, were responsible for 33% of those pickups. And to be honest, that's why they're expected to be two of the worst teams in the league, because they don't even have young players they want to work with. And that's a very bad sign for those two particular teams. If you think about the Eagles in general, I mentioned Eli Ricks is probably a sound decision, considering how many cornerbacks Carolina picked up. Typically, the Eagles have a history of we talked a lot about Jeff Stoutland in the prior segment, a history of getting players poached from the offensive line. In the case this year, had to worry about Dylan McMahon as a 6th-round pick, but maybe his size deficiencies were a little bit too much to overlook for the rest of the league. And they were able to get him back. Nick Gates was a veteran, so that's one you could sort of wink it. He doesn't have to go through waivers, and the Eagles have evidently promised to elevate him for week 1. So he's back, and that's key. And the tight ends, to get Jack Stoll back, is also a big deal. But, and talking about Stout, since we're talking about him, when the Eagles put offensive linemen on their practice squad, they tend to get poached, or they have. And none of them are big. You talk about Coyote Awasika, for people that remember him, Julian Good-Jones, Brett Toth at one point was poached. The Suo Peta, Miami tried to poach him, and the Eagles elevated him. Tyre Phillips was a guy who was here that got poached. So people tend to look at Stoutland and say, all right, if he's working with him, maybe we'll take a shot.
Yep. Two guys John brought in that were not here throughout the summer. Jack Stoll, who's obviously a familiar face, and then the Georgia wide receiver, Marcus, I'm blanking on his name.
Rosemy
Jackson, a Hall of Fame name. I'm giving Rosemy Jackson a Hall of Fame nomination for the name. What do you make of him, just for the people who are new and didn't hear the update on him from you? He's the one new face here in Philly.
Yeah, Eagles tried to sign him as an undrafted free agent back in the spring after the draft, lost out to the Commanders. So no surprise. They had some injuries late with Jacob Harris going down. I think he's a guy who would have been on the practice squad, to be honest, but suffered not only the concussion, but also broke some bones in his face. That's how crazy that hit was on the opening kickoff. So he's not ready. Joseph Nada is injured. So, you do need some bodies at receiver, because that's a position where you're always at. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they added another receiver to the practice squad, because that's a position you need a lot of bodies, because you might have a soft tissue thing popping up always. But I see BLG in the green room.
Let's get BLG. Let's go to Brandon Leak out in Bleeding Green Nation. Bring him up now. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Thursday practice squad day?
Doing good, guys. 8 days until the first game.
Yeah, week from tomorrow. We're getting close. I'll start it, since it was practice squad day yesterday, BLG. And you've been doing this for a long time now. It's like everybody forgets for year to year. Like, it's not that big of a deal. This year, 26 players claimed on waivers. That's it. But next year, you'll go through the same thing. Oh, the Eagles they got to keep this. They got to keep. No, they don't. Why do you think it is that way?
I think it was 26 out of 1,184 who were, and trimmed down from 90 to 53. So if you're doing the math at home, I think that's like 2.2% of the players who are cut. So yeah, it is not quite the case where you really have to sweat out losing someone. I mean, maybe the exception, and okay, if that's the case.
Every once in a while. And generally, like, it seemed like Carolina, the Eagles were probably right to keep Eli Ricks because it seemed like Carolina was taking up every corner available, and maybe he gets clean. But even Eli, I mean, boy, a lot of things are going to have to go wrong for Eli Ricks to get on the field this year for the Eagles. So, yeah, the waiver wire is one of those things where, boy, everybody gets fired up about it every year, and it's just not that big of a deal. It just isn't.
Yeah, it is kind of a funny time of year that we go through here with the 53-man roster and the practice squad and everything, because, I mean, it kind of does matter in the sense that, look at Thomas Booker. You know, he made it last year. I was on the Eagles practice squad all year last year. Now he's on the roster. Now he might actually be able to contribute. We'll see. So, you know, it matters more than not at all, but also at the same time.
No, I agree. And Howie gave a little shout out to Connor Barwin. Who is now heading the developmental program, because it's not only Thomas Booker, it's Tristan McCullum, it's Ben Van Sumeren. So I think when you talk about the young guys that have put on the practice squad, whether it's Gabe Hall or EJ Jenkins or Dylan McMahon or the new guy, Brandon Smith is a player I think has some upside. Even Caden Stearns as an injured guy trying to make it back. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. The developmental part of it, I think, is very important for the practice squad. And I think the Eagles have proven they're pretty good at that.
For sure. But at the same time, it's just like none of this really matters in terms of the 8 days away.
No.
No. Yeah. That's the kind of the funny part. It's like, all right, gearing up for the season. All the focus is on this kind of minutia for a little bit. But then obviously, it's
exactly. Well,
the real game.
But it is different from the standpoint of Nick Gates being the perfect example. Like, evidently, Adam Schefter reported he's already been promised he's going to be elevated for week 1. That's sort of the strategy. And by the way, that blew me up in the beat writer school because I had Nick making the team. And that's sort of the strategy and how we got to keep somebody else and do the wink deal with Nick Gates. But he's going to be the more important as a game day backup than, you know, maybe Darian Kennard, as an example. It's a little bit more interesting, I guess, from a strategy standpoint, by liberalizing the roster roles. So, like, is Gates and Jack Stoll more important than Darian Kennard and Jelix Hunt for Green Bay?
Right. Yeah. Maybe. I think another funny thing to the Gates thing is because Washington is still on the hook for his salary or some of it this year. That,
nice little jab at Josh Harris.
This is like elite level GMing here from Howie, where it's like, you know, now he's making the Commanders pay at least 3 extra weeks, probably, if they want to eventually add him to the roster after his elevations are up and then sign him. But make the Commanders pay him right now until then.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point as well. That's an extra part of it. Roster as a whole, though, initial 53. Now we know, and I'm glad we got you on today because Howie and he was right. You know, when you talk after it's not complete, I think he used the term incomplete, and everybody's like, only 2 tight ends, no backup center. So now that you know the plans for backup tight end and backup center, what are your concerns with this roster, most notably?
Yeah, I do like how they handled those. I feel comfortable with those spots. I think getting Jack Stoll, that I think if I didn't talk about it here, I've been talking about it elsewhere where, you know, he looked like he was going to be on the outs with the Giants.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was your second tight end last year and now he's your third tight end. So that seems pretty reasonable. And then to have Gates in there, who I thought, kind of came on nicely after the Eagles signed him a bit later into camp. It's a good question. I think, you know, the pass rush is still like a question mark in terms of not having that dominant player other than Jalen Carter, but more so, you know, talking about the edge rusher position. And it seems like the Eagles messaging and what they seem to believe with their actions is that's kind of going to be more of like a unit, like the pass rush coming together as a unit than it is that one star player dominating from there. I I think that stands out as one of the areas that is both important to the team. It's really on the trenches on both sides. I really think those are the most important areas to the team, and I don't think they're as good at those spots as they've been in years past.
BLG, I want to ask you about the trade last week. We haven't had you on since then, so just we'll get back into the 53. But what do you think of the trade for Jahan Dotson, a third rounder? I thought was a little steep, but what do you think he can be for this team? How much does he open up the offense? How much of an impact will he have here in Philly?
Yeah, I mean, I like the move. I don't know if I love the move. I think it was worth making. It's not. I think the value is fair and fine. I do wonder, if the perception of Jahan Dotson might be better than the reality of Jahan Dotson. In part, and I maybe this is as simple as the Commanders don't know what they're doing once again, and they're dumb, and this was a bad move for them. But when I try to look at it from the Commanders' perspective, like, why are they getting rid of this guy? Doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense, unless maybe they trade for Ayuk, and that would kind of make more sense eventually. But I mean, to give up on a guy this young when you don't have much at that position and you're trying to help your own young quarterback in Washington, that kind of just raises a red flag for me. It makes me wonder, okay, why were the Commanders willing to give up on this guy? Had a really, I think he looked good in his rookie season, took a step back last year. I'm okay with the bet the Eagles are making here. And I think there's certainly something to be said for taking off the pressure of, as a former first round pick in Washington, where now he's just going to be expected to be the third wide receiver here. So I like it, but to me, it's not like A+ Howie season, how he swindled the Commanders. I just kind of wonder, like, okay, what if there's something here we don't really realize?
I think it's another good, and I think from Washington's perspective, I think people got to get used to they're not dumb anymore. I think Adam Peters is going to be a good GM, and I think Dan Quinn's going to be at least a solid and a head coach. And there's a lot of changes there, and the changes, those guys didn't draft Jahan Dotson, so they don't have the history with him. So they're like, all right, we don't want him. We don't need him. And I look at it from that perspective, BLG, is nobody else was going to give him a third round pick for Jahan Dotson. So from their perspective, I think it was a good deal. From the Eagles' perspective, I also think it's a good deal because the Eagles are in a position where the Super Bowl window is open. And I know everybody wants winners and losers, but I think that it made sense for both sides. I really believe that. And we were just talking about the first round pick tag, because people hear a bunch of people, I'm sure you get it at Bleeding Green as well. A bunch of people are calling Nolan Smith a bust. And he can't do this. He can't do. It's one season where he had a shoulder injury. I mean, let's give the guy a chance. And that's the same with Washington with Jahan Dotson, as you brought up. He's a first round pick here, there. Nobody cares about that here, and they're all fired up about him. It's an interesting sort of thought experiment. When you put that first round tag on people in their cities, it is a really difficult expectation to deal with. And if they leave, everybody gets excited. Everybody's excited about Jahan Dotson in a new city. So I like your thought about the perception greater than the reality. Eagles fans think they're getting the 16th overall pick in the draft. I'm not sure. I think he was a little bit overdrafted, BLG. Fair or unfair?
I think fair, and also kind of funny to consider how one of the reasons the Commanders are giving up on him is apparently they feel good about the guy who was Eagles wide receiver 4 last year. Olamide Zaccheaus. Like, that's kind of it's kind of funny and kind of a little weird to think about that. It's like, okay, not that it is as simple, I guess, for the Eagles as just to re-sign him, but like, it is kind of funny how the Commanders seem to like him, and that's part of the reason why Dotson is here. I mean, you're talking about the perception of the first round thing. That was always something with Derek Barnett, and I think Josh Sweat, and obviously Sweat turned out to be the superior player. But I think always that perception, because Barnett was drafted high and Sweat was drafted later, even if there was a point earlier in their careers where I think it was a lot closer and everyone would probably, think much more favorably of Josh Sweat just because of, the virtue of the draft position and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, again, I think Dotson will help. I like the move. Obviously, they had to do something because they had no real clear answer there at wide receiver 3. Paris Campbell wasn't able to really do much, wasn't able to stay healthy. John Ross, same thing. And, Britton Covey, I think, is a nice guy to have around as a fourth receiver, possession kind of guy, not someone you're going to trust to play on the outside, obviously. And then Johnny Wilson just, I don't think, showed enough to be, trusted to play a whole lot right away as a rookie. So I think they kind of had to make a move. And I like the move. I don't necessarily love the move.
By the way, just as a quick follow-up, because she brought up Paris Campbell. Now, we're just over a week away. Nick Gates is going to be one guy elevated. We know that. Who's number 2? Is it going to be Paris Campbell or is it going to be Jack Stoll? Because the hot Dotson might not be ready for a full complement. But they'll probably throw him out there. I would think it would be more Stoll than Paris Campbell, but it's interesting. Yeah. Is that the way you would go?
Yeah, I wonder if Covey might, have more of a role than he will then moving forward, just because, of what you mentioned there. I'm sure Dotson will be that guy anyway, but maybe there's just a little bit of a learning curve where they would want to, not put too much on his plate right at the jump in week 1. But yeah, I think it'll be Stoll because I think they want to have the ability to, run 12 if they want to, or just, also just needing that body maybe for special teams. And they clearly have liked Stoll's run blocking in the past. Of course, that was under Nick Sirianni having more control over the offense. So we'll see. But yeah, I think Campbell will be more of a break glass in case of emergency.
Any moves on the 53-man roster, BLG, that you did not like that stuck out to you that were things you didn't understand or just didn't like on the 53?
Hard to say with the context of getting Dylan McMahon back on the practice squad.
Right.
Obviously Howie had a good enough read on that. I still think you can criticize that or say that's probably maybe not a guy you should be even risking losing. Like last year, for example, the Eagles didn't lose Britton Covey, but they could have misread that. Yeah. And that would have been a joke because he's the best punt returner in the NFL. And to just cut him when you probably could have, kept him otherwise. The
Christian Ellis, it didn't work.
Exactly.
They tried to get Christian Ellis through waivers.
And on Christian Ellis, a guy they kept around instead, Albert O. Why are they using one of these?
I can't figure that out, man. DLG, I can't figure that out.
It is hard to believe. We haven't seen him do anything since he's gotten here. We've seen him actually sometimes get open and Jalen Hurts not want to throw to him at all. So Jalen Hurts clearly doesn't trust in him. He doesn't play special teams, which is what a backup tight end needs to do. I really struggle to understand why I would use one of those spots on Albert O. That just doesn't really make sense to me. The Eagles seem to love him a lot more than everyone else.
Yeah. Well, that to me, and we were talking about this, a couple of us down at NovaCare, and it's all right, you have this new rule where you can put guys on injured reserve before the cut to 53. And I asked Howie about that. I'm like, did it change your strategy at all? He's not going to admit they're not injured in Anias's case. Mm-hmm. But he did mention that they were probably going to keep those guys. He intimated they were going to keep those guys. So he's saying they would have kept Albert if he wasn't hurt. Because Albert's legitimately hurt, at least. I don't know if Anias is or isn't. Anytime you have a football player, it's probably something banged up that you can, blow out of proportion. But Albert's legitimately hurt, had core muscle surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But he said essentially he was going to keep him. I've seen nothing from Albert Guegbanon. Good guy, but I mean, and he gave up. Everybody points to the trade and the ego, but really he only gave up draft. I think he gave up 20, 30 spots in draft positioning. Really? Is he just keeping him around for ego?
I don't. There's really no great way to explain it other than like Matt Russell, who's in the Eagles front office. I guess who was with the Broncos when he was drafted. I guess maybe it's him who like really loves him a lot. But
speaking of Matt Russell, remember, was it his nephew that was here, Brady Russell?
Brady Russell last year, yeah.
And he's stuck with. I don't know if he's still on. I think the Seahawks, but he's stuck with the Seahawks, and he was somebody like, why aren't you keeping your nephew?
fair
he's still on the Seahawks.
Maybe he loves Alberto more than his own nephew.
Nothing about it makes sense. Nothing about it makes sense. BG.
No, nothing.
Yeah. Enough about the Alberto tangent, but it is one of the more strange. One of the interesting give and takes. And I don't think there were many of them because Howie pretty much consistently said, I wish I could talk to you tomorrow. And by the way, he could, BLG. I love that. He can talk to us whenever he wants.
He's being held against his will.
Yeah. But you had that little back and forth with him and Nick admitting they have different jobs, which I thought was interesting. And they do. And Howie's got to think more about the future as well as right now. And Nick admitted, like all the coaches, he threw Jeremiah Washburn under, like he wants to keep everybody at his particular position. I thought that was interesting. Do you think the Eagles handled that fence and straddled that fence well? Or is it, Super Bowl or bust? We shouldn't be worried about prospects. You think about it from a baseball standpoint all the time. Everybody, they never turn out. Take the proven option. Is that the same for you in football or a little bit different?
I mean, in this case, it's hard. Like they didn't lose anyone, right? So other than like maybe you could argue like, okay, Julian Okwara, like, that was a player that could have been nice to have if the Cardinals, didn't scoop him up. But I mean, they already have 6 edge rushers on the roster. And Patrick Johnson had a good summer. I think it's fair to have kept him over Okwara. There's not really too much I can quibble about. And I do think it's important to have an eye on the future, especially because it's a 46 game day roster. So, right. Or 47 if you have the extra offensive linemen. So, a lot of these guys, or some of these guys, this might be healthy scratches all year anyway. Practice squad members, and I think there's strategy there and maintaining those players and having an eye on next year. And it's a fine line and you have to balance it, and I think there's a way to do that in a way that also can potentially make sense for this year. All of a sudden you get thin at a certain spot, wouldn't be ideal that you might have to play a really young player, but sometimes that's how young players get better, is that you have to play them and force them into action, maybe sometimes sooner than you would ideally like to do so. So, I would not really, there's nothing too much I can really crush the Eagles for here, Albert O thing aside.
BLJ, what do you think about the depth at the edge rusher position? A lot of fans in our chat, a lot of fans in our comment section have been talking about it for quite a bit of time now. I said to John earlier in the show, you could argue from 3 to 6 with BG, Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, and Patrick Johnson. Any given one of those guys could contribute as the 3rd best edge rusher on any given Sunday, depending on, what's going on. What do you think of the depth at the edge rusher position?
I mean, I think it should be Brandon Graham. He looks like he can still play to me based on what we saw.
He is 35 though, so my projection would be like if something happened, any given one of those guys could be the top guy that day.
That's the question. Like, how much can he handle? But at the same time, and John said this, I think, when we were talking earlier this year, just last year, time to empty the tank.
Empty it. That's
John's
what I've
been saying that for a while. Yep.
And so I absolutely subscribe to that. No, obviously you want to keep him, fresh or relatively like, you don't want to burn him out early in the season. You want to have him play, maybe really the time to empty the tank is later in the year, when especially make the playoffs and everything. But yeah, I mean, I think it should be a top 3 of Huff, Sweat, and Graham there. And then beyond that, like, I don't know, because
I think it might be Patrick. I think Patrick is the 4th best edge rusher on this team.
He seems to be the most like if it's a truly a meritocracy, which it is very much not always that. Yeah. I would say he has the strongest case to be playing over Nolan Smith. And Jalix Hunt is a rookie he's still dealing with that oblique injury, so we'll see what his timeline is here. But yeah, I think at least to start, it should be Patrick Johnson. I agree.
Speaking of oblique injuries, it's a little bit bleak on Dallas Goedert. He was not practicing yesterday. That is an injury. There's different levels, obviously, but boy, could they be without Dallas Goedert week 1 against the Green Bay Packers? And then you got to do some roster manipulation. You probably got to put Stoll on the roster immediately. Boy, we won't get a real injury report till, I don't even know when they're going to practice. I guess Sunday, Monday, they're going to practice. Such a goopy Friday game, week 1. So, yeah, I think they're going to practice Sunday, Monday, and we'll get a better indication. But, boy, he had the baseball cap on. I mean, he doesn't look in any discomfort, but that's got to be a little bit of a concern with Dallas Goedert week 1, I would think. A little bit of uncertainty. How concerning is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, seeing that he wasn't there, the reports that he wasn't there, like, okay, we're getting close to a week out. That's not the best feeling. I do agree with you. Even looking at him on the last day of camp, where he missed, that's I think the first day he missed that practice, he seemed to be moving around well for whatever that's worth. And also, I guess if you're looking for the optimistic side here, maybe the fact that the Eagles only did keep 2 tight ends on the 53 signals that they're not super concerned about this, at least in the short term here. So I'm going to just take it that he'll be okay to play. And, they didn't do anything more serious at tight end that would signify that,
that's okay. A good point. That's a good point. You would think if they were concerned, certainly long-term, multiple week concern, that they would have done something else. All right. So you calmed me down there. Good job, BLG, from that perspective. But yeah, I did see Dallas yesterday. He was not practicing. And he's not the guy that you're worried about that needs a full week of practice. If he's healthy, he can go out there and do it. I'm sure we talked about it, but I want to bring it up again. I think this week 1 game in Brazil is awful for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a potential significant NFC contender with Green Bay. It's a game that you would have had at Lincoln Financial Field. Obviously, and their GM has already spoke about this. He's like, he's not in love with going to Brazil either, but he said, at least we don't have to play in Philly, essentially. If the Eagles and Packers are fighting for home field advantage down the stretch, which is a big possibility, and they lose this game on a neutral field, I'm surprised Jeffrey Lurie didn't push back on this. I'm really surprised, or at least, I think he's more open that the league as a businessman wants to grow internationally. But if I were Jeffrey Lurie, I would have pushed for Cleveland.
Yeah,
you never want to lose any game, but all right, AFC foe, not as big as it is. Green Bay giving up that game against a significant contender on paper, I don't like it. I don't like it, BLG.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair gripe if you're an Eagles fan or part of the organization, like you just mentioned. Yeah, the fact that it could have been and seemed to be, at least based on some of the leaks that happened at first, that it was going to be the Browns. Yeah, I think that's a key difference in terms of you lost the ability to get, have this home field advantage that you were supposed to have over this team that could then be incredibly meaningful when it comes to the playoff seeding later down the line. So, it's for what? It's like this novelty of a thing where the Eagles are playing, in a different country. So yeah, I think that's a fair gripe coming from the Eagles side, and it is an advantage in the Packers' favor, or at the very least, it is a neutralized advantage for the Eagles and takes away their ability to have that edge. Yeah, I think it's tough. Obviously, you get the advantage potentially, if you consider that, of the rest on the back end coming off of the Friday to the next Monday against the Falcons. But also part of that is there's travel baked in, and that could kind of disrupt their schedule.
You think the NFL overruled? Because, John, you keep bringing up Lurie. I would imagine Lurie argued that he didn't want the Packers. And I wonder if the NFL was just like, no, we want the better matchup in the NFC on that Friday night. It's a primetime game. It's opening week. You think the NFL might have just kind of squashed any Jeffrey Lurie input on that?
I guess, like John said, like, I think Lurie does care about the international market. He's talked about that in the past.
Yeah, he does for sure.
And I think there's probably something to be said too for, like, it's not just another Europe game. It's like the first game in South America. There's like that, allure of like, hey, this is, and it's on a Friday. It's very, not that I think Jeffrey Lurie by any means is like Jerry Jones when it comes to caring about like being in the spotlight. But, when you're a billionaire owner and, you have this team that you want to show off, I'm sure, that there is value in that. But
no doubt.
Yeah, so I would guess he's more, focused on that part and cares more about that ultimately. But yeah, I mean, I think, and there's only so much you can do anyway.
Yeah. And if they win the game, none of this matters. So win the game, Eagles, and none of it matters. And then you have, but Green Bay potentially is going to be a very good team. And it is an interesting matchup, certainly from the league's perspective, two high profile teams going about it early in the season, second game of the season, first game. So I get it from the league's perspective. I just think it's not a good thing from an Eagles perspective. But they can quell all that talk by just winning the football game. And BLG back, since we'll finish it off with the roster at least, and make sure you follow Brandon on the X platform at Brandon Gouton. You can read him at Bleeding Green Nation, does a tremendous job there. If you looked at this team, and I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks, I may have mentioned it to you in the past. Obviously, the strength is the offense, right? I mean, this is the best offense on paper, maybe ever for the Eagles, if you think about it. Playmakers all over the place, franchise quarterback, top 5 offensive line. On paper, off the charts. Defensively, I think it's going to be better, growing unit. However, depth-wise, I think they have more depth on defense than offense. Agree or disagree?
I mean, inarguably, in terms of the bodies on the, like, they have 28 defenders to 22 offensive players, and last year on the initial roster was actually 24 to 27. So that disparity has grown a little bit there. Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I think like the offense is, more top heavy where, you have like the high end talent at these positions, whereas the depth, not so much. And then the defense, a little bit more of the opposite case where I think kind of like Jalen Carter aside, maybe you want to argue Darius Slay too. They don't quite have as much of that high end talent. And I think the linebacker position is like a perfect example of that. Like, I don't think it's about anyone feeling amazing about the Eagles' top linebacker option, whoever that even is, and whoever it will be the linebacker.
I've been saying this for weeks, but you could bring Oren Burks up from the practice squad, and I think you're going to get comparable play.
Right. And like you said, Brandon Smith makes this roster on many years past where the Eagles don't have as much like baseline competency at linebacker.
I do think Nakobe can take the next step, though. I think Nakobe could be the guy that's above the rest. Everybody else, I think you can mix and match and you'd be fine. I really believe that. And including Brandon Smith. I think he was one of the I think you came up. I loved your thought process on the best player with no shot to make the team. I think you described
right. Yeah.
I love that category. I went Perry Nickerson. I think you went Brandon Smith, right?
I did. I like a Brandon Smith. He showed me a little something last year when they had to play him, and he looked good on the special teams unit.
Yeah. I love the category. I like the player. He's so big, so athletic, so lengthy. I think that was part of the problem. I think you look at him and say, well, he's an edge rusher. It kind of that Zach Bond a little bit. Is he an edge rusher? Is he an off-ball linebacker? But I think he's worth working with. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm very comfortable with the Eagles' depth at linebacker. When's the last time you could say that?
Famous last words. I feel like,
Yeah.
I agree, but also in years past, it's been like, oh, this unit's not great. They're not maybe even good, but they're definitely better than the Drek that they had last year. So there is the danger of that. But based on, again, what we saw in training camp, I mean, all the linebackers played relatively well. No one had a camp other than, I think, Nakobe, had a tough start. He rebounded from that, but no
Yeah.
one had any kind of camp where you're like, ugh. Like this is kind of looking bleak here. Certainly, like it did last year when Nicholas Moreau was supposed to be. He was the first guy up the
Yeah.
first team defense,
Yeah.
and he didn't even make the initial 53-man roster. He was getting beat.
I got a
Dallas
kick
Goedert.
out of Ben Van Sumeren was talking yesterday at BLG, and a bunch of guys, understandably, it's cut down day, and they're asking him, "What were you doing on cut down day?" And he was like, "Nothing." He knew
Yeah.
he made the team. And wasn't concerned about it at all. And it probably got the heads up from the coaching staff that, yeah, you're making the team. And I think that surprised a lot of people. But even he played well. Trotter very well as a rookie. As you mentioned, Nakobe coming back, Zach Bond, Devin White. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to be great, but I don't think anybody's going to be terrible. Even if you need to go down to Trot and Ben, to be honest, that's better than usual.
And I do think you kind of talked about mix and matching. I mean, I think that's what could happen here still. Like, I don't think it's done and dusted that it's just two guys the whole time, the whole season. I think it's kind of an evolving situation there.
Yeah. And it's a better situation. And Vic will help as well. I think Vic Fangio will certainly help the defense as a whole. Brandon Gouton does a tremendous job at bleedinggreennation.com. You can check him out there. All his coverage of the cut down, the practice squad, everything going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. Does a tremendous job with us and everywhere else you see him. Podcasting legend.
He's all over the place, BLG. He's everywhere.
Yeah. And
That's
he's
right.
tall. He's Fred
That's true.
Johnson level tall.
Oh, even taller. Yeah, I'm even taller.
No, even tall. Yeah, you're taller than Fred.
Don't sell me short.
Did you see the picture I got of Fred and Isaiah Rodgers yesterday from practice?
Yes. Yeah.
Isaiah was waving hello, but the size difference is unbelievable. Everybody should check that out. Just sized it.
BLG, what's the official ruling? Is it 6'10"?
6'9".
6'9". Nice.
6'9". Fred's only like 6'7". You got him beat.
You only got
everyone on the roster beat.
Yeah.
Jordan. Yeah. Makai's only not quite 6'8". Jordan's 6'8", I guess.
Yeah, you guess you'd have to go to the NBA, BLG, to get topped out.
That's right.
I think Makai looks bigger than Jordan.
I agree. But I think that's like Jordan's not. He's not 6'8" then. Like I don't think it's Makai is actually 6'9" because I think again I'm still above Makai.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like Jordan might be like 6'7", Becton might be 6'8".
Yeah. All right.
BLG, thanks for joining the show, man. One of our viewers today dubbed you as the best mustache on YouTube.
Oh, wow. You're getting a lot of love.
That was the dubbing today from one of our guys.
I haven't seen Grant Calcaterra's mustache.
I don't know, man. BLJ might not only be taller than Grant Calcaterra, but he might have him beat in the mustache game.
I'll tell you
That's
what,
high praise.
The
Thank
confidence
you,
that the mustache has given Grant Calcaterra. I mean,
I'm sensing the same confidence from BLG, John, and all his off-season reports. He's taking it to a new level with the mustache.
All right.
All right, BLG. Thanks for joining, man. We'll talk to you next week, all right, brother?
Take it.
See you.
Thanks, bud.
There's BLG joining us on Birds 365. Great stuff from BLG. Just about 5 minutes left to go here on the show today. Johnny Mac, a good show today. A lot of good viewers in here. 137 likes. Can we get 13 more likes in the last 5 minutes? If you guys enjoyed the show, definitely hit that like button as it helps us grow.
By the way, real quick.
Yep, go for it.
As some of the Tom Pelissero reports that the most popular player on waivers was cornerback Shamar Bartholomew, but Sam Womack, another cornerback, it was claimed by 3 teams. The Colts were awarded him over the Chiefs and the Eagles. So the Eagles put in a waiver claim on Sam Womack, another cornerback, which tells you how much, but probably has more to do with special teams. But anyway, they did put in at least one claim. They did not get Sam Womack. There you have it.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. What's your final takeaways today, man, on the show? With it was the practice squad episode today, Johnny Mac. Nothing really crazy, not much to talk about with it, as much as we would like to kick it around for hours on end. They added the receiver from Georgia. They brought back Jack Stoll, and the rest are exactly as we projected they would do, basically. But any final thoughts on today's Thursday edition of Birds 365?
We're getting close. That's my final thought. I hadn't realized you get focused on the minute and all the cuts and all. It's a very busy week for us. But, boy, they're going to be playing football a week from tomorrow. So things got to settle down. They got to get in the preparation mode quickly. And they will do so. It's kind of a crazy week from that perspective. Labor Day coming up. Eagles are going to have to work on Labor Day, obviously. And hey, season is here. Good to get here. Center cleared up, tight end cleared up, and we'll see how things shake out.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Let me make sure I got everybody up to 149 likes. So thanks, everybody, for getting us close to 150. I think we'll hit it in the next 3 minutes. So thank you guys all for being here. Johnny Mac, I thought we had a pretty good show today. We'll have a good show planned tomorrow. Damo, I would project, would be here in the morning.
Yeah, I got to check and try to get our Ed Kratz if he can do Friday as well. So hopefully we'll have those guys for you, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But we'll be back either way. And I got to get out of here. I got to run down to the NovaCare complex.
All right, we're going to get out of here a couple minutes early. Get John a couple minutes on the road. 2 minutes on the road now. Getting on the road early it saves you 6 minutes in traffic as it continues to build up. So we'll get out of here. John, great show today. Thank you all in the chat for hitting that like button up to 153. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, good show, man.
All right, thanks, everybody.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.